Well, without further ado, I present you guys 10 Metz.
I appreciate y'all suffering through my introduction. That was right off of my website, 10metz.com. I'm still politically active, so all of that may or may not be relevant. It just shows that I have had a very long life. I haven't been stuck in one occupation for my entire life. I still thirst for knowledge. I like skipping around. I like learning new things, and I think everyone should always strive to learn something new every day. I think when people lose the love for learning is when they start to die. So don't die yet. Today I'm going to be talking about organizations. As you heard, I did go to Georgia State University and study business. I do have a BBA in business administration. So I know a little bit about organizations and organizational psychology. So I have a plan here. I'm going to show you a little bit about organizations, how they're structured, and how they work, and how to work within an organization. But then I'm going to show you also how you can use an organization to infiltrate other organizations to affect change. Because that's what we really want. We do want change. We do want change, but we want positive change for humanitarian purposes to increase freedom, liberty, personal responsibility, and freedom from government. That's the overall goal, right? To improve the freedom index. So here we go. We're going to start out. I always like to start out with the definition. I hope that's not as fuzzy up there as it looks on my screen. But the definition of an organization is an open system communication among people within a specific context for the purpose of achieving common goals through cooperative effort. Does that pretty much nail it? Because, how many different organizations are there? There's charitable organizations, there's public and private organizations, there's organizations that you belong to that you don't probably even realize it's an organization. Like, how many of you guys get together to play Dungeons and Dragons or video games? Okay, that's an organization, but it's not formal, right? You don't have a charter and all that sort of thing. So here's a little, diagram of the different kinds of organizations. You have public and private, and of course you have organizations for social purposes, and you have organizations for commercial purposes, and this is all sort of one of the quadrants. Government we can look at being a public, social administration, social purpose type of organizations, from the lowest level of the city, county, state, municipal, federal, blah, blah, blah. That's all public organizations. Then you have your private entities that are really looking for social change. That would be like the Red Cross, Susan B. Komen Foundation, things like that. And then you have private industries, the lower quadrant. That would be like, General Motors, Lockheed, Grumman, and all of those people. And then on the public enterprises for commercial purposes, you have things like, I'd like to say the Global Initiative, but that's not quite right. So public enterprises that are for commercial purposes would be something, I can't think of the example, I had one earlier and I've escaped me. So I'd say something like Coca-Cola, because that's a publicly traded. You have one post office, sort of, yeah, because they're Federal Reserve. There you go. There's a private entity that's out for dollars. So here we go. This is like another Venn diagram of the same sort of concept, where we have private sector, public sector, and social society organizations, and there is some overlap or intermingling in the middle. So here we go. Charities on one hand, businesses on the other. Businesses, of course, are in business to make money, generally speaking, unless they're a tax scam for somebody, but that's another story. And so businesses generally they generate income. Their success is based on their stock value and the returns to investors, return on investment, and shareholder wealth. And of course, their sole purpose is increasing shareholder wealth. Then on the charity side, you have things that are pretty much completely reliant on donors. And that's one of the things about some of the organizations that I'm affiliated with, like Peach Street Normal or the Georgia Care Project. Our effectiveness is tied to how much money we can raise. And sometimes raising dollars is not easy. So that's one of the limitations of charities. And of course, they're success is based on their ability to steer public opinion, also known as environmental impact of what their message is. And most of them, by and large, have a purpose of benefiting society. But let me point out a couple. Like right now, all of you are from Georgia. Do y'all keep up with the Georgia news about what's been going on in the legislature? Nod of the head, like you're not. Come on. Some of you. How many people have heard about HB 481 being labeled a heartbeat bill? That's an example of the whole abortion industry is very interesting because you have people on both sides of the equation. You have the medical association on one side, big pharma, all those guys on one side of the issue, and then you have all these anti-abortion industry people who propagandize. They collect millions of dollars monthly, it seems, to go around and fight abortion. They have lobbyists, they have organizations, they do commercials, they do social media outreach, and essentially they're making money off of a controversial issue. So when we talk about charities, we kind of really have to look at what the charity is actually up to in order to decide whether it's good or not. Like some people criticize the Susan B. Komen Foundation because we know that there's a cure for cancer, but they perpetuate, oh, we got to find a cure for breast cancer. And by the way, in case you don't know, tetrahydrocannabinol, also known as medical marijuana, has shown great promise in curing breast cancer. Why is it suppressed? Big pharma spends a lot of lobby dollars. All right, so that's one other example of a charity who's not very good at what they do as far as promoting general global humanitarianism is the Clinton Global Initiative. Anybody know those guys? I just want to point them out because when they were initially chartered, their charter was to build a presidential library, and that was the sole purpose of the Clinton Global Initiative. And they're still wondering where the billions of dollars that were supposed to go to Haiti ended up. So nefarious charities also exist, as well as some nefarious businesses. But then in the middle of the social enterprise stuff, those are again government, non-governmental agencies, like again Federal Reserve. They can generate money. They don't rely on donations, and they often have big impact. So those are your kind of spectrum of different types of organizations. And any organization, of course, starts with an idea. And then after you have an idea, you have a clear definition of goals. How do you want your idea to work? Or how do you get to disseminate the information? And then that comes with a mission statement. So any business, of course, has to have a mission statement, right? They have to have goals. They have to have an idea about what they're going to do. So, and then the most important thing after you make all the decisions is how do you go about sharing the idea? So this is what I was mentioning earlier. The real simple organization is like the Friday Night Poker League. Like it's informal. You have a bunch of guys who are members. You make decisions about when, where, who brings the beer, who brings the pretzels, right? And then on the opposite spectrum, you have complex organizations. And I'm using United Parcel Service because that was an interesting story of one guy with an idea. We started out small and built, and grew, and now he has a very complex worldwide enterprise. So again, having an idea, being able to share it, and then being able to sustain that idea is how you maintain organizational integrity. So the two examples here, one's informal and one's extremely formal. So how do you go about actually getting your organization set up to run, to be able to accept donations, to be able to be a recognized entity? Well, it all starts with a charter. The charter contains the mission statement. So, XYZ organization is going to march for the rights of, sapling trees. That's their mission statement. Then you go and you write bylaws. Okay, our organization is going to have executive board members. It's going to have committee members. It's going to have voting members. The voting members vote on the board of directors and blah blah blah. That's your bylaw. And it basically gives you the structure of how the organization is run, how to make changes, what the rules and regulations for running the organization. And then you go and you do the registration process through the Secretary of State's office, the city business license, etc. You have to have a federal employer identification number if you're going to be a charitable organization. One of 29 different kinds of 501c organizations that get tax exemptions. 501c 3 are the most common. And so that's the next step. So once you do all that, then you figure out kind of the structure. How is this going to work? Almost every organization has some sort of hierarchy. Even our country, we have founding members up the top. That's the body. That's the group of people who get together and decide, hey, you know, we all have this common value. We all have this common goal. Let's get together and form it. That's kind of like the founding members. And that's like the body of the organization. The body gets together. They elect a board of directors. Sometimes they in order to have a corporation of any sort, a registered organization, at a very minimum, you have to have a president, a vice president, and a secretary. Sometimes that varies, like a chairman, a co-chairman, and a secretary or a treasurer. But you have to have 3 separate and distinct people in order to actually file to get a business license, to get registered in the Secretary of State's office. So that's that first. Now, moving down from there, you have your committees. Essentially, everything in an organization is run by committees. It doesn't matter if it's a public business or public organization or a private organization. You still have like the marketing department, the communications, the IT department, and that's like your committees. So when you form your committees, here I have like a pretty common committee for a private charitable organization. You got your communications committee, they're the ones that run social media and get the messaging out. The membership committee is the ones that like deal with like collecting dues, if it's a dues paying thing. Fundraising committee is always out trying to find the dollars. And then of course the event committees, you can't really do anything without having events, right? If you're any kind of organization at all, you have to have events. So under each of the committees, you have the members of the organization who actually volunteer to be part of the committee to get a specific task accomplished on behalf of the organization. Below that, you have volunteers, and then under the volunteers, you have the general public. So moving right along, this is kind of a long-winded way of saying the different sorts of organizations have different types of organization, different key points, blah, blah, blah. This is the long one. Here's a shorter version. A very simple thing. You have like a centralized decision-making board. Then you have like the machine bureaucracy. It would be something like Ford Motor Company. You know, their whole purpose in life is to produce a product at the lowest output unit cost, right? So they're all about making sure that their process is lean, mean, and maximized in the utility. So professional bureaucracies, if we compare this to government, with their prime coordinating mechanism being the standardization of skills, standardization of skills. That could be a school. You know, you have a bunch of people who are the teachers. Under that, you have a bunch of people who are the helpers, and then you have the administrators. So anyway, it's all about operating level, and their type of decentralization is both horizontal and vertical, because vertical, of course, is the state passes a budget and says you have to have so many things, blah, 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 it works down, that's the vertical. The horizontal is each school is their own entity, so they get the news from the top, and they put their plan into action at their level. It doesn't affect other schools, only theirs. So the visualized, you can figure out that one. Adhocracy is what a lot of activist organizations are. That means, you know, a bunch of people get into a room and they kind of make decisions without really having a formal plan or agenda. They just like ad hoc everything. Hey, you guys want to help me with this? Okay, sure. You know, there's no formal structure. It's not like HR has written an employee manual and given each of those people a task. Say, okay, this is what you are, this is your title, and this is your duties. So that's another thing that organizations often do is they have like exhaustive policies and procedures manuals to enumerate every specific duty you have, and then at the bottom it says, and other duties as prescribed. So that's a little bit about how that works, but let me tell you, any organization really only survives on their leadership. So how many organizations do we know that have had like spotty leadership who have collapsed and once were like great pinnacles of business? I'll give you an example. Hewlett Packard. For years, Hewlett Packard was one of the biggest Fortune 50 companies globally. They hired one executive director or chairman of the board. I won't name her name, Harley Fiorona, basically ruined the company. So leadership has a lot to do with how a company is perceived, its image, its perceptions to the public, and its course of longevity. Because it only takes one person to kill a business. And I'm sure you can think of people who like look at Apple after Steve Jobs passed away. Have they been doing as well as they were before? No, because they're not the same quality of leadership. So organizational culture, that's kind of what I was talking about, leadership. Also, when we look at an organization, you want to be flexible up at the bottom level. You want to be stable at the top. Stability in a lot of businesses is very important. Like, let's say the oil industry. You have to have a stable supply going to all of your refineries to make sure that the oil flows to meet demand. So you need stability there. Flexibility, on the other hand, would be like, I can't think of an example off the top of my head at the moment, but you can say like fast food. If you are a food distributor and suddenly there's a big fad food like kale, you have to be flexible enough to be able to ramp up to meet the demand. But once kale came out with the news that it was the most pesticide-laden thing you could put in your mouth, this is going to drop. So all the suppliers have to be finding some other substitute for that. So they need flexibility. So I guess that's on the left is external forces, and on the right is internal forces. Internal forces are things like internal processes. Like the government essentially is kind of an internal thing as far as their mission and the way they run. Everything is like all these people have to do the job the right way to get their internal paperwork finished. And then the external thing is like looking for market share. That's your entrepreneurialism. That is your competitiveness. That's like Ford Motor Company competing with General Motors over their identical looking SUV. That's how you look at external focus. And again, internal focus is like, let's look at internal revenue service. Their idea of their business model is to find as many dollars as they possibly can, and they use their internal processes to do that. They're not trying to get market share. They're not trying to find customers. They're just trying to maintain their tyranny of taxation. So bureaucratic, the upper left-hand side is how government agencies and some of the old dinosaur industries work. Competitive stuff, like a lot of companies, like especially software companies, Facebook, Google, those people are looking to be competitive, so they're always looking for new talent, they're always looking for new ideas. Entrepreneurial stuff would be like Virgin Air, I can't remember that guy's name off the top of my head. Branson's always looking for something else to go and diversify into to increase market share. And then, of course, on the lower left hand is the community stuff. That would be your organizations like Salvation Army, Red Cross, and really what they're looking for is just making sure that they can maximize their impact and help their communities. So moving right along. Culture is another thing. There are a lot of things we can think about in corporate culture. For example, the competitive stuff up in the upper right-hand corner, now it's like blue, is, let me look at this for a second. In the upper right-hand corner, some companies work best when they're collaborating, making sure that they're all together on the same page. That would be a company, again, General Motors. They want to make the best product possible, lowest unit cost, and that takes a lot of interdepartmental coordination, collaboration, and communication. When we're looking again at the upper right-hand corner, this would be again like government. Lower right-hand corner is. I'm going to skip this slide because I didn't prepare it. So we'll move on. once you can understand about culture though, because some businesses we will go back again. Like software companies are real loose. They have food available all the time. They're real flexible on their hours. They don't mind if people come in on unregulated medications. Whereas some companies, like trucking companies, are very strict on compliance with all the laws, making sure that their employees are totally drug-free. And then you have like the military, also the same thing. You have to meet their standards. You have to follow the hierarchy. So those are different cultures for different sort of industry types. Some are very strict because they have very demanding standards. Some are real loose and they're looking for the artistic expression of their employees because that's what makes their sales go up. So moving to the next slide. When you're looking at an organization, what you're really looking for is sort of a cycle. You know, because everything has to do with everything else. If you start at the top, we're going to start with the aspect of organization in the upper left-hand side. The mission determines their activity, right? Their mission is to produce the fastest car on the planet. Their activity is going to be the development of the fastest engine and the best transmission, etc. If your organizational vitality is all about operations, how you do things, public perception and stuff, you're going to be focused on that. Democratic management process is something that's really interesting because some companies allow everybody to participate, some are absolute authoritarians, and it's their way or the highway. So human resources for a democratic organization versus a strict authoritarian, it takes a certain personality type to fit into that corporate culture. So you have to sort of factor that in. Then if you're grounded in the community, you know, financial resources are something that's very, very important in your effectiveness as an organization, because if you don't have the funding, you can't get the community to need help. So you can see this is a whole circular thing. Everything that you do, everything that you try to do, determines how your activities are, and if your activities are, how you do your activities determines whether or not you're fulfilling the mission. If you can't fulfill your enterprise aspects, then you're going to die. You're not going to get any funding, your products aren't going to sell, you're going to wither and die. All right, now, so that's a little behind the scenes on everything you need to know about companies, right, and organizations. The next thing you need to know about is how organizations are actually run. So pretty much everything on the board of directors everything in an organization is started with the board of directors. The board of directors decide what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And then they pass that on to the executive committee. You can look at this like the board of directors telling upper management to tell the lower management to tell the employees to do stuff. So in a community organization or a nonprofit, the executive committee would decide on the tactics. The board of directors does the strategy. The executive committee does the tactics, and the committee chairs actually get the volunteers to work towards fulfilling the goal of whatever mission they're doing. And then essentially all of the volunteers are the ones that actually do the work, craft the message, and disseminate the message. Oops. And then of course they use social media, earned media, public contact to get their message out. Now, you probably heard everyone say, oh, I got to go to a meeting, I've got to go to a committee meeting, I've got to go to a Student for Liberty meeting. Well, meetings generally should be held as often as necessary. Like in some infant organizations, you need like a nightly conference call to make sure everything's going right. After things are up and running, you can cut it down to quarterly, and under the law, you actually, in Georgia, to maintain your corporate charter, you have to have at least an annual stockholder meeting. So once you have things up and running, you can cut the meetings behind, but you should have them as often as necessary to get it together. One of the best requirements for a meeting is to have an agenda. What is it that you need to accomplish during this meeting? And then, how many people have heard of Robert's Rules of Order? A couple. Almost every organization, if you get together for a meeting and you don't have some structure in order to run the meeting, how are you going to make sure that it's orderly and you accomplish the goals of the meeting, which is to get through the agenda? Well, Robert's Rules of Order have been around forever. Almost every organization uses them, And if you're not familiar with the Robert's Rules of Order, I would beg you to go online and look it up. Because even government uses Robert's Rules of Order for committee hearings. City Council runs on Robert's Rules of Order. And if you understand how Robert's Rules of Order work, you can be a lot more effective as a grassroots activist going to your city council and demanding change. So I've been to some meetings that don't use Robert's Rules of Order, and they're very disorganized, and they never seem to make the meetings go long. That's just so. Here's the best meeting formula: is of course once you have the agenda should be done well before the meeting and distributed, so that everyone knows what you're going to talk about. So when you get to the meeting and sit down at the appointed hour, the gavel can be banged on the desk and say, okay, we're calling the meeting to order, which is the clue for the treasurer, or I'm sorry, the secretary, to start recording the meeting minutes. First thing you do is you approve the agenda, and if there's something like on the agenda that you don't want to cover this month, or there's like some problem with not being able to get it, you can strike that from the agenda. Sometimes you can amend the agenda, add something, oh, by the way, this just came up, we can talk about it. Then you can do that. The next thing you do is approve the meeting minutes from the last time. The thing about reading the minutes from the last time, that reminds everybody about, okay, this is what we were doing last month. These were the business that was still not finished. This is the stuff that came up. And that sort of sets the tone, oh yeah, we got to talk about that tonight. So the next thing is the committee reports. Since the committees are the ones that are actually doing all the work, essentially, they're the ones that are reporting the progress. So the committee report is more or less a progress report. Here's how we did it. We sent out 10,000 emails to list A. We got 3% opens. We're doing great. Hi, how are you? And then after the committee reports, then you go over the old business, because the old business essentially is what you were supposed to have done before this meeting. So you go over the old business, which is, okay, good. You just, the communications committee sent out their 10,000 emails. We're good. So then you go through all the old business to make sure that you cover stuff, find out the problems, find out the bottlenecks, how to allocate resources towards that one issue. And then you move on to new business. And new business essentially, okay, what we're going to do for next month, here's our goals. We're going to reach out to the next number of people, we're going to go out and such and such, we're going to go join a coalition, we're going to whatever. And if it's a corporation, what corporations will do, okay, well, we need to bump up our numbers, we need to have a sale on this item because we have too many built up in inventory. Let's have a sale, send it out to the distribution channel. So same sort of thing for a corporation as for a private organization or a charity. So if you understand how this process works, you can thrive in any environment, whether it's corporate or charitable or even government. One of the things I learned early on, I used to go with my mom, who was the chair of the PTA in the school district. I never really understood what they were doing as a little kid. As I got older, I really appreciated being able to go and watch the formality of how a meeting was held. Again, it's important to know that stuff for anyone, and especially if you're going to be an activist going into a city council meeting trying to change something. If you don't understand how it works, then you're never going to be able to get your word in edgewise and catch them in lies and catch them in the policy and procedure problem. Oh, well, I just said all that. So one of the cool things that you can do, if you understand how, every organization has a charter, they have bylaws, and they have policies and procedures. If you have an organization, like one of the things that we had to talk about at the Libertarian Party was that we created a monthly membership. And under our bylaws, our monthly, any member was allowed to come to be a voting member at the convention. And we had no specific information or language in our bylaws that said a monthly membership doesn't qualify for a voting membership until they've been a member for 367 days. So we had to clean all that stuff up. So the thing is, I'm pointing that out because my logic in that was, with our bylaws the way they are, and now with this new membership, it said you have to have been an active member for at least 60 days before the convention to get voting rights. What that told me was, for $6, a group could come in and completely take over the Libertarian Party. So if they knew the rules and they had the motivation to do that. So this is something that you guys should think about. It's like, if you see an organization that's struggling, or you don't like what their message is, or you don't like what they're doing in your community, find out what their bylaws are, find out about when their committee hearings are, find out all that stuff, and then you could actually plan to take them over. And once you take them over, you can like shut them down. You can like vote to like dissolve the organization. Something to think about. We try to do this with the Ron Paul movement. How many people? I don't see any old folks in there. Sorry. But that's kind of what we tried to do. A lot of our grassroots activist friends got together and we actually started showing up during the, I guess the annual convention process for the Republican Party. The Democrat Party does the same thing. They start out in the spring at the precinct level, voting for people to be delegates to the state convention, or actually the county convention, but the county convention votes on people to go and vote at the state convention. The state convention can change leadership, right? So if you want to change either the Republican or the Democrat Party, you get a bunch of your friends together, enough of them to outvote the current membership. It's actually pretty simple to do if you were organized and had that as a mission. So again, knowing the bylaws and knowing the rules is very important, and also it's very important for keeping government accountable. And if I have time, I'll get to that in a minute. So, do you think that's interesting? You want to go take over a group or organization? All right, so once you have an organization, most of the time you already know what your idea is about how you're going to go about what your social change or what your mission is. But I'm just going to go over the big points here. Is like once you've identified your opportunity, then you analyze the market. Does everybody know you like do a market survey? Like if you want to come up with a new type of French toast, is the market already saturated? How many other French toast manufacturers are there? You have to kind of know those things, and then you have to look at their marketing, their advertising, their social media presence, in order to compete or to change. Because if you want to compete with them, you have to know what they're up to. So that's your opportunity analysis. It's like, well, how many people like French toast? How many more would like it if they knew that they could get it? So that's what you're doing. Then you go back to from the identification of your opportunity to the analysis of the marketplace. Then you can start generating ideas about how you're going to put your marketing plan into effect. But once you start doing it, you have to monitor it. You have to implement the strategy, and then you have to monitor to see how you're doing. And if you're not doing that well, then you need to go back and revise your strategy. I call it peer, plan, implement, evaluate, review, and revise. Peer, pressure, P-I-E-R, plan, implement, evaluate, review, and revise. All right, so pretty much any organization, what their whole focus is to change public opinion, right? How do interest groups attempt to influence government and public opinion? Number one, the direct approach, face-to-face, getting in your face, I guess peeling off $100 bills, campaign contributions, that's the direct approach according to this. And then there's the indirect approach, which is what like Students for Liberty is supposed to be doing. Young Americans for Liberty and several other groups, what they're supposed to be doing is building public support through grassroots measures. How many people are familiar with Americans for Prosperity? Heritage Action Sentinels. Move on. What's that one? Something for America. I mean, there's a bunch of groups on there that actually are grassroots trying to change public opinion. So everything is about shaping public opinion. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But you see right here it says using propaganda. Some propaganda is actual propaganda, which means that it's not necessarily true. You can make truthful propaganda, and propaganda really is all about having a marketing message that resonates with people to invoke an emotional response to get them to do what you want them to do. And if you look at what's happening right now in America, we are the most propagandized we have ever been. There was a bill that was eclipsed in the 2012 Defense Authorization Act, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012. Eclipsed the Smith-Blunt Act of 1948, which was a legislation that forbid the U.S. government from distributing propaganda within U.S. soil. Guess what? In 2016, they completely repealed the Smith-Blunt Act, and now the government is got full authority to distribute propaganda. And what does government do to stay in power? They propagandize to distract and divide. They don't tell you the truth. They come up with these ridiculous things. I've actually got a slide on this. I'm going to shut up for a minute. So anyway, that's what we're trying to do, is influence public opinion. So again, in influencing public opinion, you analyze the position, you prioritize your criteria. It's like, okay, what are our criteria to do this? Okay, well, who are the emotional triggers for these people on this particular issue, and focus on them. But defining the goals, again, is about how you're going to measure what are your metrics to see whether or not you're being successful. And then the accountability part is like, who is it that we are relying on to get the message distributed on social media in a timely manner? How do we hold them accountable if they're not doing it? So, and that's the review part. You constantly monitor, evaluate, review, and revise in order to hone your message. All right. Where does public opinion come from? Obviously, it comes from how you grew up, who you grew up as, who your parents were, who your community is, all that sort of thing. But of course, interest groups all day long try to influence our opinion. A lot of times it's for personal profit. I don't probably have to mention any specifics, but the other thing is the mass media kind of also controls the narrative. You've always heard this word, the narrative, the spin. How are they withholding some parts of the story to make it as if something else is different? You've seen those pictures of a guy that looks like he's got a gun in his face. You pull back a little bit, it's actually a canteen. You pull back a little bit further, and the scene is not what you're seeing in the picture. That's all about steering public opinion. So they use different aspects for different people. Anyone familiar with a psychologist named Jonathan Haidt? The moral roots of help me out here, that one particular TED Talk he did. I can't remember, but anyway, he kind of he deciphered 5 different generalized groups according to their emotions based on their background, such as age, gender, religion, socioeconomic things. So those are what you're looking at when you're formulating your marketing strategy. So this is essentially the same thing. What shapes public opinion? Basically, it's whatever messaging is being put out there. Because Stalin said, tell the lie big enough, tell it often enough, and soon it becomes the truth. That's what propaganda is, and that's what public officials do a lot. Also, special interest groups do the same thing. They put out some fictitious message to get you to start adopting their thought on it, even though it's false. It drives me nuts. So, of course, does the media have influence on public opinion? You know, if Twitter bans conservative tweets, if Facebook perpetuates, leftist agenda and stifles, conservative thought, does that influence public opinion? Well, of course it does. If you watch, goodness gracious, on one side you got Sean Hannity, on the other side you got Rachel Maddow, and they discuss the same story in such different ways, appealing to someone else's bias, confirmation bias. So you have to be aware that propaganda is used daily, and yes, everybody uses some sort of propaganda, some sort of emotional trigger, some sort of cultural trigger to get you to respond to their message. So, the role of the media is, shaping public opinion, shaping the agenda, and what the media stopped being is they stopped being a watchdog. The last time the media was a watchdog was, are you ready for this? Does anybody remember the last breaking news story that affected government in a negative way? It starts with Watergate. Watergate was pretty much the last real investigative journalistic story that got the mainstream press. Immediately immediately after the Watergate, they formed the Washington Press Corps, and pretty much all the news ever since has been censored, filtered, spun, washed, rinsed, and repeated. So we have to keep an eye on our media, because they're no longer the watchdogs for what's going on in government. Okay, public opinion. Well, the first point here, the best PR campaigns in the world can't be built because the reality is destroying them. We have a great example of that just from recently. The Russians meddled in our, Trump colluded with the Russians to meddle in our elections. Wheeler report apparently exonerates them, but they're still using that. That's one of those things. They're still making a PR campaign that Trump meddled with the Russians in the election, and the reality of the situation, recent revelations seem to be destroying that message, even though it's still being perpetrated. And the thing about that is it's really hard to change somebody's mind once they formulated their opinion, and most people know that. One of the things that a few years ago they were talking about net neutrality. Everyone here familiar with the opinion of net neutrality? Net neutrality from the people who run the infrastructure, their perspective is net neutrality means that this is my infrastructure. If somebody's going to clog up my infrastructure, I have the right to charge them more. That's the truth about what net neutrality is really all about. Government not telling everyone that they have to treat all traffic equally. That's the wrong approach. That's not free enterprise. Most people that were on and getting mad about net neutrality, their perception of net neutrality meant that everyone on the planet had equal access to high-speed internet. To them, that's what net neutrality meant. So no matter what you could tell them or what you could show them, once their opinion was formed, it's very hard to change. And that's the next slide. So when you're devising a PR campaign, it's really meant to persuade individuals to change their mind, to crystallize unformed or undeveloped opinion. A lot of times the media tries to get out ahead of something, break the story. They automatically. How many people here got to actually see 9/11, the Twin Towers fall live on TV?
You were too young.
I guess so. Well, one of the things, in the early, within the first few minutes of the broadcast, Dan Rather actually made a statement was that the buildings coming down looked like controlled demolition. He said that. And then within 10 minutes, the entire story changed to eliminate the possibility of controlled demolition, which is another story. But the point of it is that the media controls the narrative. The truth can be out there, and for a lot of people, 9/11 is still one of those subjects that you either think it was terrorists, that the planes caused the buildings to collapse, or you're a realist and know a little bit about physics and gravity and plastic flows and such, and you look at it and say there's no way a plane could, diesel fuel melt steel. We'll get away from that. So anyway, a lot of people's opinion is very hard to change once they have their idea set for them in their heads firmly. And that's one of my favorite cartoons. Basically, is the newscaster, talking head. Welcome to the 6 o'clock news. Here's tonight's what we want you to think. Forming opinion. So remember, to be effective as an organization, especially a grassroots organization, you have to use all those factors of culture and age and all those demographics to use your emotional messaging to get them to either change their mind or align with your views or take some sort of an action. And it's more stuff here, like highly sensitive to important events. One of the events that we see all the time is like the kids in the cage at the border, right? Even though later we find out the kids at the border in a cage weren't really in a cage, there was some other protest, it was just a media hoax. But that image, you can't get that image out of your head. So influencing public opinion is real easy to do if you're right on at the very beginning of some sort of an event that causes an emotional trigger. It can be a tragedy, it can be outrage or something like that. If you're right there to steer the dialogue, you can form someone's opinion and have them keep that opinion forever. And again, generally influencing public opinion is determined by events more than words. We just learned. And in critical times, people become more sensitive to the accuracy of their leadership. If they have confidence in it and are willing to assign more responsibility, if they lack confidence, they are less tolerant. Going right back to 9/11, what was the aftermath of 9/11? The Patriot Act. What did the Patriot Act do? It took away most of our enumerated natural rights that are listed in the Bill of Rights. But we were okay with it because giving up security for safety is important. So a lot of times when self-interest is involved, opinions are hard to change. When people who are pro-nuclear energy, again, they know the science, they know it's a good thing. They're not going to change their mind because their opinion is based on fact, which is indisputable. But on the other hand, we can talk about climate change for a second. That's not settled science. But the people who bought into, carbon dioxide is going to kill us, it's very hard to show them the science that says carbon dioxide is necessary for the plant growth. Plant more crops will take care of it, which is why I campaign on industrial hemp, because it's a carbon sequestration. All right, so people have more opinions and are able to form opinions on goals more easily than on methods of reaching those goals. So if you have a goal to end world hunger, that's easy. Everybody's for ending world hunger. But if you say, okay, we're going to end world hunger by getting your $100 monthly pledge, that's not so much easy, is it? So you have to flavor all of your goals and your implementation, your tactics to reach the goal to be something that's realistic for a person, not only to buy into, but to take action. We can kind of, because people are resistant to change. So when you're looking at a matrix of how to develop your strategy, are you trying to make it so that it's flexible or stable or interdependence or independence based on what your issue is and who you're trying to reach? For flexibility, some people like a purpose. Ending world hunger is a purpose. Stamp out illiteracy. That's a learning thing. Or it could be something that's a joy. You have to look at the range of human emotions to know how to craft your message to reach the specific target you're looking for. So, safety and order. We talk about safety and security. Authority. A lot of people like yes, we're going to be hard on crime. We want to get the homeless out. It's an authoritarian thing. Some people are very results oriented. Some people are idea oriented. And some people are caring. So people are resistant to change. Anybody believe that? It's very hard to get people to change? Because, a lot of people are get that immediately, denial. It's no, climate change is real. It has to be, because I saw it on TV. So you'll have resistance for people who are not in denial, but they don't want change. They think they can't change. And then once people kind of understand a little bit more and actually see it in action, then they might explore to it and then finally reach a commitment to your idea to change their opinion. So it is a process, it is a cycle, and let's see the next slide. Well, it doesn't, I'll get to that. So what do you do? How do you get an idea to change? Well, you have to find people who are opinion leaders. Opinion leaders are the people who are the wonks and the policy foundations who are able to, I'm sorry, but how much more time do I have? Do we have 5 minutes? All right, so let's skip ahead. There's type of opinion leaders. You know what opinion leaders are? Those are the guys that are the early adopters. The most powerful way to affect change is through persuasion. Either persuasion by example from your actions, or through a good argument. So one of the things about any kind of change or any kind of spreading an idea is the whole concept of diffusion of innovation. So you have your individuals who are the innovators, and that's the first sort of people who adopt. Like, the first people that bought a cell phone. Those were your early adopters. Those were your innovators. They thought it was cool technology. They bought into it, and they tried to spread it. And then the next group of people are your early adopters. Those are the early ones that are in it. It's not popular. And at some point, that when some kind of a new product comes to market, it's real expensive for your at the early innovation stage, and the product gets cheaper and it's market share, so the price drops. So then you get more people in it, and they see their friends with it and stuff like that. Ideas and new technologies following the same thing. So that's what we're kind of looking for when you're doing your marketing or your initial issue rollout. Is you have to find your innovators to help you spread your message to the early adopters. And when you get some early adopters behind you, then it starts gaining momentum. But often what happens is you have a chasm. You get to a point where only so many people have bought your product or bought your idea, and it's not spreading to the rest of the population. This is kind of where libertarianism is right now. We're in the chasm. We haven't gotten to the early majority yet. We're still in the early adopter phase. So this is the curve that I was really referring to as far as the market share goes. Because this is a bell curve. The middle is 50%. You can expect 50% to be the market share. So it's a little bit off, but I can stretch it. So that's what happens when you get more and more people involved. If you're selling a product or something like that, the more people who adopt your product, the bigger the market share. So, how do you get your market? How do you get your message out? I'm going to be real fast with this, but who is your target market? Are you looking for business-to-business customers, business-to-customers, governments and communities? What is your priority? I'll have this available for you to download. I'll give it to you. You guys can distribute something like this later. But anyway, once you get this underway, you want to always analyze. You want to go through and review. You want to make sure that your marketing strategy is working, that your goals are being met. Of course, if you're doing politics, here's the grid of what it looks like for the different political groups. Again, demographics is everything. We have liberalism, we have populism, libertarianism, conservatism. So, real political spectrum looks like this. We're trying to get freedom. Anarchy is really the last step of freedom. We have libertarianism, conservative, and of course, communism, which is all statism. This is 100% control, 100% freedom. So if you're looking at Democrats and Republicans actually being separate entities, no, they're both supposed to be totalitarian. So this is one of the things that you need to look at. Also, if you're trying to spread a political message, you actually have to look and see where these people lean. Are they leaning Republican, Democrat, or independent? And this is really what the reality zone is. When it comes to our political process right now, we've got 26% of people actually identify and say, I am a Republican. 31% say, I am a Democrat. They'll fight you because they're Democrat. And then we got 38% in between. These are what is being considered independents. But they're not really independent. They just don't really like their lesser evil choices on this side. There's only about 7% of the total population that is truly independent. And of that 7%, that's where libertarians live. So if we're trying to spread liberty, this is where we're trying to spread it. We can't reach these guys because these guys are too far away from our thought process. So if you're trying to spread liberty, this is where you need to concentrate. So any marketing effort you make should be with these guys that want to say they're independent, but they do have a vote. This is where elections is in the swing voters. So the other thing that you need to consider is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Anybody familiar with this concept? And this is our problem with people on both extremes of here. We've got people at the extreme ends of the spectrum who cling so vigorously to their opinions that has been formulated for them, and they've never really thought through it. That they will not change their opinion, and they will get into a fist fight. That's these guys who have like no knowledge, no experience, no expertise. Their confidence that their idea is so hard that they're willing to kill to prove that their idea is the right idea. When you start getting more experience and getting more information, more knowledge, your confidence starts going down. It's like, well, and that's why people cling to their ideas. They don't want to get in this non-comfort zone. So if you understand something, if you have an opinion of something, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's uncomfortable for you to use your brain to think. So you're up there. Once you start opening up to new ideas, then your confidence goes down. Maybe everything I've ever learned was false. Maybe everything I've ever been taught in school was false. I've been lied to my whole life. And then as you start getting knowledge and stuff, your confidence starts going back up. So this again is the whole thing. So I'll end here saying, never underestimate the power of stupid people and marshmallows. So we need a lot more people out there shouting for liberty rather than totalitarianism, either of the fascist variety or the communist variety. Thank you for your attention.